The Vorn fleet has destroyed 3 more border outposts, announced General Fax, a tall, blue-skinned alien with 4 arms. His upper hands manipulated the holographic display in the center of the table, showing red dots where coalition territories had fallen. Their main battle group will reach the Calmer system within 5 days. Voices rose in alarm. The Calmer system was a major trade hub, home to billions of civilians. If it fell, the Vorn would gain a foothold deep in coalition space. "We must gather all available ships to defend it," said Ambassador Will, her feathered crest rising in agitation. "Every member world must contribute to the defense fleet." More voices joined in, offering suggestions, arguing about tactics, and debating the merits of evacuation versus defense. The noise grew until Admiral Dorn slammed his fist on the table. Silence fell instantly. Admiral Dorn rarely spoke at these meetings, but when he did, everyone listened. The old warrior's gray skin was crisscrossed with scars, and his single, remaining eye glowed with a fierce light. He had fought in more battles than most of the others had witnessed from their command centers. "There is another option," he said, his voice like gravel. "We could ask the humans for help." The silence deepened, becoming something almost physical. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Surely you're not suggesting—" Ambassador R let her words trail off, unable to finish the thought. "I am," Dorn said firmly. "We ask the humans to send the Nemesis." The name hung in the air like a curse. Several of the younger officers looked confused, but the veterans, those old enough to remember the last Great War, exchanged knowing glances. "Most of you have only heard stories," Admiral Dorn continued, his eyes sweeping the room. "Some think they're just tales to frighten cadets, but I was there 10 years ago, when humanity was still new to our coalition." He touched the holographic controls and the display changed to show a distant star system. "New Eden," he said. They called it a small human colony world. It had little strategic value, but the Vorn attacked it without warning or provocation. The humans had only one warship close enough to respond. The hologram shifted again, showing a dark angular vessel that seemed to absorb the light around it rather than reflect it. "The HSS Nemesis," Dorn said quietly. "We expected nothing. The humans were newcomers, their technology unremarkable by our standards. One ship against a Vorn battle fleet? We prepared to welcome the survivors after the inevitable defeat." He paused, his scarred face grim with memory. "There were survivors," he said, "but not the ones we expected." Commander Zack, one of the younger officers, leaned forward. "What happened?" "The Nemesis destroyed the entire Vorn fleet," Dorn replied. 177 capital ships, 35 support vessels. All gone. And when it was over, the human ship simply disappeared, returned to their space without a word. Murmurs filled the room. Ambassador R's feathers flattened against her head. "That's impossible," said General Fax. "No single ship could—" "I saw the battle records myself," Dorn cut him off. "What that ship did, it shouldn't have been possible. The humans have technologies they don't share, weapons they don't discuss, and tactics," he shook his head. "They fight like nothing I've ever seen. If this ship is so powerful, why haven't we heard of it since?" Commander Zack asked. Dorn's eye narrowed. "There was an incident 5 years ago. Something happened at Proxima Centauri. The details were classified, but afterward, the humans withdrew the Nemesis from active service. Some say they were ashamed of what it had done." The room erupted in debate. Arguments erupted across the chamber. Some insisted they should request human assistance immediately, while others warned against involving a force they couldn't control. In the end, a vote was taken. By a narrow margin, the coalition decided to send an envoy to Earth. Halfway across the galaxy, Captain Thomas Reed stood at the window of his small cabin, looking out at the Pacific Ocean. The morning sun glittered on the water, and for a moment, he could almost forget the dreams that had woken him before dawn, dreams of fire, silence, and the cold void of space. The doorbell chimed. Reed didn't turn from the window. "Come in," he called, knowing who it would be. Admiral Wilson entered, her uniform crisp despite the early hour. She carried a data tablet and a look of determination that Reed recognized all too well. "They're reactivating the Nemesis," she said, without preamble. Now Reed did turn, his weathered face expressionless. "Why?" "The Vorn are on the move again. The Coalition has formally requested our help." Reed laughed, a short, harsh sound with no humor in it. "After what happened at Proxima, I'm surprised they'd want us within 1,000 light-years of their precious worlds." "They're desperate," Wilson replied. "And the Joint Chiefs have agreed. The Nemesis launches in 48 hours. Reed turned back, to the window. "Find someone else to command her." "There is no one else, Tom. You know that ship better than anyone alive. And despite what happened, despite the hearing and the forced retirement, you're still the best captain we have." Reed closed his eyes. He did not see the peaceful ocean. He saw the cold blackness of space. He did not feel the warm sun. He felt the phantom vibration of the Nemesis's engines beneath his feet. "She's been refitted," Wilson continued. "New systems, new protocols." She hesitated. "Some of your old crew have already volunteered to return." "They're fools then," Reed said quietly. "Maybe. Or maybe they believe in you, even after everything." Reed was silent for a long moment. Finally, he turned to face the Admiral. "What are the terms?" "Full autonomy. The Coalition gets your help, but you answer only to Earth Command. They don't get to know our capabilities, and they don't get to question your tactics." Reed nodded slowly. "And afterward, when the Vorn are dealt with, the Nemesis returns to Earth space and you with it." Reed picked up the small model ship that sat on his desk, a perfect miniature of the Nemesis. Black, sleek, and terrible. He had carried it with him through 5 years of exile, a reminder of what he had done, and what he might have to do, again. "When do we leave?" he asked. Wilson handed him the data tablet. "Your reinstatement is already processed. Transport leaves for the orbital shipyard in 3 hours." As she turned to go, Reed spoke again. "Admiral, do they know? The Coalition, do they know what they're asking for?" Wilson paused at the door. "I don't think anyone truly knows what the Nemesis is capable of, Tom. Not even us." She exhaled. "That's what scares them. That's what scares all of us." After she left, Reed looked down at the tablet. His new orders were clear. "Take command of the HSS Nemesis. Defend Coalition space against Vorn aggression. Return when the mission is complete." Simple words for what would be anything but a simple task. He packed quickly, taking only what he needed. As he took one last look at his home of 5 years, he realized he felt nothing. No sadness at leaving, no joy at returning to the stars, only a cold certainty. The galaxy was about to remember why they had feared the name Nemesis, and why they had feared its captain even more. The orbital shipyard hung in space like a massive metal spider, its long arms cradling the dark shape of the HSS Nemesis. As the shuttle approached, Reed pressed his hand against the viewport, his eyes fixed on the warship that had once been his home. The Nemesis was unlike any other ship in Earth's fleet. Where most human vessels followed the same design principles as their alien counterparts, sleek, rounded hulls with a certain aesthetic appeal, the Nemesis rejected beauty for pure function. Its angular asymmetric form was covered in weapon mounts and sensor arrays. The hull was coated with a material that absorbed rather than reflected light, making it appear as a ship-shaped hole in space. "She doesn't look 5 years older," Reed said quietly. The shuttle pilot nodded. "They've kept her ready, sir. Like they knew someday they'd need her again." The shuttle docked with the shipyard, and Reed made his way through the familiar corridors. Personnel stepped aside as he passed, their faces showing a mix of respect and unease. His reputation had only grown during his absence, it seemed. At the main airlock to the Nemesis, a familiar figure waited. Commander Alex Morgan straightened to attention as Reed approached. 5 years had added some gray to Morgan's hair, but the sharp intelligence in his eyes hadn't changed. "Captain," Morgan said, offering a crisp salute. "Welcome back." Reed returned the salute. "XO, I didn't expect to see you here." Where else would I be? When they said they were reactivating the Nemesis, I requested immediate transfer. Morgan's expression softened slightly. Most of the old bridge crew did the same. Wilson, Chen, Davis, they're all aboard. Reed felt something stir inside him, the first real emotion he'd experienced since receiving his new orders. After Proxima, after what happened, I'm surprised anyone would want to serve with me again. Morgan met his gaze steadily. What happened at Proxima wasn't your fault, sir. Those of us who were there know that. Reed didn't respond to that. Instead, he gestured toward the airlock. Let's see what they've done to my ship. The interior of the Nemesis was both familiar and strange. The basic layout remained the same, but Reed could see evidence of the refit Admiral Wilson had mentioned. New control panels, updated systems, modifications to the weapon stations. As they walked through the ship, crew members stopped to acknowledge their captain's return. Some were veterans who had served on the Nemesis before, their eyes showing recognition and respect. Others were new, young faces that regarded Reed with barely concealed awe. They've been telling stories about you, Morgan said, noticing Reed's reaction to the younger crew members. About us, about what the Nemesis did at New Eden. Stories get bigger with each telling, Reed replied, especially the scary ones. They reached the engine room where Chief Engineer Marcus Wilson was bent over a console, arguing with a technician from the shipyard. Wilson was a large man with massive hands and a wild beard that defied military regulations. When he saw Reed, his face split into a broad grin. "Captain, about time you showed up." He waved dismissively at the technician. "Tell your supervisor I'll sign off on the changes when I'm good and ready, not before." As the technician left grumbling, Wilson turned. Back to Reed and Morgan. "They've been trying to improve my engines for weeks. Idiots wouldn't know a phase inverter from a plasma regulator." Reed smiled slightly. "Some things never change. What have they done to my ship, Chief?" Wilson's expression turned serious. "A lot, sir. Some good. Some..." He glanced around and lowered his voice. "Some changes I don't agree with. Come see." He led them deeper into the engine room to a sealed door marked with high-security warnings. Wilson entered a code, and the door slid open, revealing a large chamber dominated by a device Reed didn't recognize, a complex arrangement of curved metal and pulsing energy fields. "What am I looking at, Chief?" Reed asked. "They're calling it the Prometheus Drive," Wilson replied. "It's what they've been working on for the past 3 years. The reason they kept the Nemesis in reserve instead of stripping her for parts." Morgan stepped closer to the device, his face reflected in its polished surfaces. "It's supposed to replace the Ghost Drive." Wilson nodded. "The Ghost Drive let us go invisible to sensors. This thing..." He shook his head. "They say it can do a lot more, but it's experimental, dangerous." Reed studied the device, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. They wouldn't install it without a reason. "The Vorn," Morgan said. "They must be expecting one hell of a fight." Wilson grunted in agreement. "The techs won't tell me how it works. Say it's beyond my clearance." His beard bristled with indignation. "On my own damn ship." Reed placed a hand on the engineer's shoulder. "It's still your engine room, Chief. I want you to learn everything you can about this new drive. If we're going to use it, I want to know exactly what it does." As they left the engine room, Reed's data tablet chimed with a message. "The Coalition. Representatives are docking in 30 minutes, he told Morgan. "Have the senior staff meet me in the conference room." On the bridge of the Nemesis, Reed stood before the main view screen, watching as the last of the shipyard's maintenance arms withdrew from the hull. The ship was now free, connected to the station only by docking clamps. Around him, the bridge crew worked at their stations, their movements becoming more confident as they reacquainted themselves with the ship's systems. Morgan stood at Reed's side, reviewing the final departure checklist. "All stations report ready, Captain," Morgan said. "Pre-launch diagnostics complete. The Coalition observers are aboard and settled in their quarters." Reed nodded. "Notify Earth Command that we're prepared for departure." As Morgan relayed the message, Reed's mind drifted back to his last day on this bridge, 5 years ago. The chaos, the alarms, the desperate gamble that had saved lives but ended his career. Would it be different this time? Or was the nemesis destined to remain what it had always been, a weapon of last resort, too powerful, too dangerous to use except in the most desperate circumstances? The communications officer looked up from her station. Earth Command confirms launch clearance, Captain. We are ordered to proceed to the rendezvous coordinates at best speed. Reed turned to face his crew, feeling the weight of 40 pairs of eyes upon him. They were waiting, for words, for inspiration, for reassurance. He had never been good at speeches. Most of you know what we're facing, he said simply. The Vorn aren't just raiders or pirates. They're conquerors. They've already destroyed 3 coalition outposts, and they won't stop there. He looked around the bridge, meeting each gaze in turn. We've faced them before. Some of you were with me at New Eden. Others have only heard the stories. Today we all find out how much of those stories are true. He turned back to the view screen where the vast blackness of space awaited. Release docking clamps. Take us out. Helm. 1/4 power until we clear the solar system. Then prepare. The jump drive. As the Nemesis pulled away from the shipyard, Reed felt the subtle vibration of the engines through the deck plates. The ship seemed to come alive around him, responding to his commands as if it had been waiting for his return. Somewhere out there, the Vorn fleet was advancing toward its next target, unaware that the Nemesis had been unleashed once more, unaware that their worst nightmare was coming for them. Captain, Morgan said quietly, so only Reed could hear. The crew is wondering, will we use it? The Prometheus drive? Reed watched as the stars streaked past on the view screen. Let's hope we don't have to, XO, for everyone's sake. But deep inside, in a place he rarely acknowledged, Reed knew better. The Nemesis hadn't been reactivated, hadn't been fitted with experimental technology, just to frighten the enemy. This time, like the last, they would be asked to do the unthinkable. And this time, like the last, they would not refuse. The Nemesis dropped out of jump space with barely a shudder, a testament to Wilson's skill with the engines. On the main screen, the Coalition fleet came into view, a collection of ships from a dozen different worlds gathered to face the Vorn threat. 53 vessels, reported Lieutenant Davis from the sensor station. Mostly light cruisers and support ships. Only 6 heavy capital ships. Reed studied the fleet. Even from a distance, he could see the differences in design and technology, a reflection of the various species that made up the Coalition. Some ships were streamlined and elegant, built more for speed than combat. Others bristled with weapons but lacked the advanced shielding that would keep them alive in a prolonged engagement. Not much of a defense force, Morgan observed quietly. Reed nodded. They've been at peace too long, forgotten what real war looks like. Incoming transmission from the Coalition flagship, Captain, called the communications officer. On screen, Reed ordered. The view screen shifted, revealing the face of Admiral Levick, the Coalition fleet commander. Levick's reptilian features, scaled skin, and vertical pupils gave him a perpetually suspicious look. Captain Reed, he said, his translator rendering his words with only a slight delay. Your arrival is timely. We had begun to fear Earth had reconsidered its commitment. The Nemesis was in reserve, Reed replied. It took time to make her ready. Levick's eyes narrowed slightly. Yes, I've heard this ship has been inactive since the Proxima incident. I trust that will not affect your performance in the coming battle? Morgan stiffened beside Reed, but the captain's expression remained neutral. The Nemesis is fully operational. Admiral, my crew is ready. We await your orders. Excellent, Levick said, though his tone suggested he was far from convinced. We're holding a strategy session in 2 hours. I expect you and your senior officers to attend. The transmission ended. Morgan let out a breath. Friendly sort, isn't he? He's scared, Reed said. They all are. Morgan glanced around the bridge. Of the Vorn? Reed's eyes remained on the screen where the Coalition fleet hung against the backdrop of stars, of what we might do, of what we've done before. The coalition flagship's conference room was crowded with officers from a dozen different species. When Reed entered with Morgan and Lieutenant Davis, a hush fell over the room. Eyes turned to observe the humans, their expressions ranging from curiosity to poorly concealed fear. Admiral Levick gestured to empty seats at the table. "Captain Reed, please join us. We were just discussing defensive formations." Reed sat, noting how the officers on either side shifted subtly away. "What's the latest intelligence on the Vorn fleet?" Levick touched a control panel, and a holographic display appeared above the table. It showed the predicted path of the Vorn fleet toward the Kalmar system. "Our scouts report 20 capital ships, supported by approximately 40 smaller vessels." Levick's scaled face was grim. "They will reach the outer defense perimeter within 18 hours. One of the coalition captains, a tall, thin alien with luminous patches on his skin, spoke up. "We've positioned automated defense platforms along their likely approach vector. When they engage those defenses, we can catch them in a pincer movement." Reed studied the tactical display, then shook his head. "It won't work." The room fell silent. Levick's vertical pupils narrowed to slits. "Explain." "The Vorn don't fight like you do," Reed said. He stood and moved to the display, adjusting the holographic representation of the enemy fleet. "They won't commit their entire force to a single attack vector. They'll probe for weaknesses, sacrifice their forward elements to identify your positions, then strike with overwhelming force at the point where you're most vulnerable." "You seem quite familiar with Vorn tactics, Captain," said another coalition officer, his tone suspicious. Reed's expression didn't change. "I've fought them before at New Eden and at Proxima." The name hung in the air like an accusation. A murmur ran through the assembled officers. Levick leaned forward. "Perhaps you would care to share your expertise with us, Captain Reed. What would you suggest?" Reed looked around the room at the alien faces, some hostile, others uncertain. They didn't trust him. They didn't trust the Nemesis, but they needed them both. "The Vorn respect strength," he said finally. "They're pragmatic. They don't fight battles they don't think they can win." He pointed to several points on the tactical display. "We need to convince them that attacking Kalmar will cost them more than they can afford to lose." "And how do we do that?" asked the luminous-skinned captain. Reed's face was grim. "We hit them first, hard. Show them what they're facing before they commit their main force." "A preemptive strike?" Levick's voice held a note of shock. "With what? Our fleet is barely half the size of theirs." "Not the entire fleet," Reed said. "Just one ship, the Nemesis." The room erupted in objections. It was suicide, they said. Reckless. Impossible. Reed waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. "The Nemesis has capabilities your ships don't," he said quietly. "We can bypass their forward screens, strike their command vessels, and be gone before they realize what's happening." "The ghost drive," one of the older officers murmured, his voice hushed. "The stories are true then." Reed didn't confirm or deny. "What matters is that we can hurt them, make them reconsider their attack." Admiral Levick studied Reed for a long moment. "And if this fails, if your ship is destroyed, we lose our strongest asset before the main battle even begins." "It won't fail," Reed said, his voice carrying a certainty that silenced the room. "But if you prefer, we can wait here. Let them come to us and hope your defense plan works better than I think it will." Levick's scaled face remained unreadable, but after a moment, he gave a curt nod. "Very well, Captain Reed, you have 12 hours to prepare your preemptive strike. But know this, if you fail, the defense of Kalmar falls to the rest of us, and we will remember who left us to face that burden alone." Back aboard the Nemesis, Reed stood in his ready room, studying the tactical data they had received from the coalition. Morgan waited silently, watching as his captain analyzed the enemy fleet's composition. "They don't believe we can do it," Morgan said finally. "Would you, in their position?" Reed asked. "One ship against 20? Morgan's lips quirked in a half-smile. "I've seen what this ship can do, sir." Reed nodded slowly. "So have the Vorn. That's what I'm counting on." He pointed to a specific vessel in the enemy formation. This one. The command ship. That's our target. Morgan leaned in to examine the data. Heavy defenses, their best shields. Also their weakest point, Reed said. If we take out their command structure, the rest of the fleet will hesitate. It might give us the opening we need. The intercom chimed and Wilson's voice came through. Captain, we finished the modifications to the targeting systems, but there's something you should know about the Prometheus drive. Reed exchanged a glance with Morgan. I'll be right down, Chief. As they headed for the engine room, Morgan asked the question that had been on his mind since the strategy meeting. Sir, are you sure about this? If it doesn't work, it has to work, XO, Reed interrupted. Because if it didn't, they weren't just losing a ship or a system. His eyes were distant, remembering. I've seen what the Vorn do to worlds they conquer. What they did at Proxima, before we stopped them. Morgan nodded slowly. Then we'd better make sure it works, sir. The two officers walked in silence through the corridors of the Nemesis, the weight of their mission settling around them like a shroud. In just a few hours, they would either strike a blow that would be remembered throughout the galaxy, or become another footnote in the growing legend of the most feared warship in space. A legend that, this time, might end in fire and silence. In the dark bridge of the Vorn command ship, War Master Cabriel studied the tactical display with cold, calculating eyes. His gray skin was marked with the ceremonial scars of his many victories, each one representing a conquered world. Our scouts, report the Coalition fleet has gathered at Kalmar, said his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Vex. 53 vessels, mostly light craft. Only 6 capital ships. KWL made a dismissive gesture with one of his forearms. No match for our fleet. Their defenses will fall within hours. There is one more thing, War Master, Vex added, hesitation clear in his normally confident voice. A human vessel joined their fleet 12 hours ago. Komol's head snapped up, his yellow eyes narrowing. Designation? The HSS Nemesis. A ripple of tension spread through the bridge crew. Many of the younger officers had never seen combat against humans, but all knew the stories. The Nemesis was a shadow in Vorn military history, a dark legend used to frighten new recruits. Biel was silent for a long moment. Unlike many of his officers, he had faced the human ship before, at New Eden, where 17 Vorn vessels had been destroyed in less than an hour, and though he had not been present at Proxima, he had reviewed the classified battle reports. The Nemesis was decommissioned, he said finally. After Proxima, the humans were too afraid to use it again. Apparently not, War Master, Vex replied. Our intelligence confirms it is the same vessel. He hesitated again. And the same captain. KWL almost hissed the name. Reed. Another officer stepped forward. War Master, this single ship cannot change the outcome of the battle. Our new adaptive shields were specifically designed to counter human weapons technology, and we outnumber them significantly. KWL turned his piercing yellow eyes on the officer. You weren't at New Eden, Commander Lore. You didn't see what that ship can do. He touched a control panel, bringing up a new tactical display. Adjust our approach. Maximum sensor sweep. I want to know where the Nemesis is at all times. You believe they will attack? Vex asked. KWL's lips curled into something, resembling a smile. On a human face, it might have been reassuring. On his alien features, it was a grimace. I know Reed, he said. He doesn't wait for the enemy to come to him. He strikes first. His gaze locked onto the screen where the Coalition fleet drifted in the distance. Let him come, KWL murmured. This time, we are ready. The Nemesis drifted silently through the void, all systems except life support running at minimal power. From the outside, the ship was nearly invisible against the black backdrop of space, its light-absorbing hull hiding it from visual detection. On the bridge, Reed sat in the command chair, eyes locked on the main screen. The distant lights of the Vorn fleet grew steadily larger. The only sound was the quiet hum of the consoles. Shadows flickered across the faces of the crew, cast by the dim glow of essential displays. Ghost drive functioning at 98% efficiency, Davis reported from the sensor station. We're effectively invisible to standard scans. What about their advanced sensors? Morgan asked. The briefing said they've improved their detection systems since New Eden. Reed's gaze never wavered from the screen. That's why we're not using the jump drive to get closer. A jump signature would alert them, no matter how good our stealth systems are. The ship continued its silent approach, slipping deeper into enemy territory with every passing second. No backup. No escape route. Only one way forward, through the heart of the minutes to optimal firing range, Weapons Officer Lieutenant Park announced. Reed tapped the comm control on his chair. Engine room, status of the Prometheus drive. Wilson's voice came back, tense but confident. Ready, Captain. But I have to repeat my concerns. Simulations show a 30% chance of drive overload if we activate it at full power. Noted, Chief, Reed replied. Be ready on my mark. As they drew closer to the Vorn fleet, individual ships became visible on the screen. At the center of the formation loomed KWL's command vessel, a massive warship nearly twice the size of the Nemesis. Targeting solution locked, Park reported. Primary weapons charged and ready. Reed straightened in his chair. This was the moment of truth. Either their plan would work, crippling the Vorn command structure and forcing them to reconsider their attack on Kalmar, or he pushed the thought aside. Failure wasn't an option. Not again. Not after Proxima. All hands battle stations, he ordered. Helm, bring us in on attack vector 93. Weapons target their command ship's propulsion systems and bridge section. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, each knowing their role in the coming fight. Sir, Morgan said quietly, standing beside Reed's chair. I've been thinking about Proxima. Reed glanced up at his XO, surprised. This isn't the time, Commander. With respect, sir, it's exactly the time. Morgan's eyes were steady. What happened there wasn't your fault. You made the only choice you could. Reed's jaw tightened. The memories of Proxima, the desperate battle, the civilian ships caught in the crossfire, the impossible choice he'd been forced to make, flashed through his mind. 30 seconds. To firing range, Park announced. We all followed your orders that day, Morgan continued. Because they were the right orders, and we'll follow them today for the same reason. Before Reed could respond, Davis called out from the sensor station. Captain, they've spotted us. On the main screen, the Vorn fleet shifted formation, ships accelerating to intercept the Nemesis. How? Reed demanded. The Ghost Drive. They're using some kind of new scanning technology, Davis reported, hands flying over his console. It's cutting right through our stealth field. Reed's mind raced. The element of surprise was gone. They were outnumbered, deep in enemy space with no hope of backup. Exactly the kind of situation the Nemesis had been built for. New plan, he said, his voice calm despite the danger. Helm, take us straight at their command ship. Maximum. Thrust weapons, full spread of Reaper missiles, target their forward screen generators. Sir. Park hesitated. At that range, the blast will affect us too. I'm counting on it, Reed replied. Chief Wilson, stand by with the Prometheus drive. When I give the word, I want full power, no safety limiters. Morgan's eyebrows rose. Captain, the only way out is through XO. Reed cut him off. We hit them hard enough that they'll think twice before following. On the screen, the Vorn ships maneuvered into attack formation, weapons powering up. The first shots, long-range energy beams, flashed past the Nemesis, near misses as enemy gunners struggled to get a lock on the fast-moving human ship. 15 seconds to contact, the helm officer reported, her voice steady despite the stress. Reed opened a ship-wide channel. All hands, brace for impact, this is going to get rough. The Nemesis streaked toward the heart of the Vorn fleet, engines glowing white-hot with the strain. Enemy fire intensified, some shots now finding their mark, splashing against the ship's shields in bursts of energy. Shields at 80% and falling, Davis called out. Almost there, Reed murmured, eyes locked on the massive form of Kalwyl's command ship filling the screen. Weapons. Fire all Reapers on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Fire. The Nemesis shuddered as a dozen Reaper missiles, the most advanced weapons in Earth's arsenal, launched toward the Vorn command ship. Unlike conventional ordnance, the Reapers briefly shifted into another dimension before reappearing inside enemy shields, making them nearly impossible to stop. Direct. Hits! Park shouted as explosions blossomed across the Vorn vessel's hull. Their forward shields are down. Now, Chief, Reed ordered, activate the Prometheus drive. Deep in the ship's heart, Wilson hesitated for only a moment before initiating the sequence. The experimental drive hummed to life, energy building to levels never tested outside a laboratory. On the bridge, screens flickered as power diverted to the new system. The deck plates vibrated beneath the crew's feet and a high-pitched whine filled the air. "What's happening?" Morgan asked, gripping the back of Reed's chair to stay upright. Reed's eyes never left the screen. "Watch." The Prometheus drive reached full power. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then a wave of energy burst from the Nemesis, spreading outward in all directions. Where it touched Vorn ships, systems flickered and died. Weapons powered down, engines stalled. The mighty command ship, already damaged by the Reaper missiles, drifted helplessly as the energy wave passed through it. Across the Vorn fleet, vessel after vessel went dark. On the Nemesis, warning alarms blared. Drive overload imminent. Wilson's voice came over the comm, nearly drowned out by the sound of failing equipment. "We've got maybe 2 minutes before it blows." Reed turned to Morgan. "Get us out of here. Maximum thrust, any direction away from the Vorn fleet." As the Nemesis limped away from the disabled enemy ships, Reed allowed himself a small smile. They hadn't destroyed the Vorn fleet, but they'd done something perhaps more valuable. They'd shown them what one human ship could do. They'd given them something to fear, and fear sometimes was the most powerful weapon of all. Alarms continued to blare. The ship vibrated violently, lights flickering as power fluctuated. "Engine room," Reed called over the comm. "Status of the Prometheus drive?" Wilson's voice came back, barely audible over the chaos. "Critical overload, Captain. The containment field is failing. We need to shut it down now or we'll lose the whole ship." Reed turned to Morgan. "Options?" The Exo's face was grim. "At this point, not many," Morgan said grimly. "The drive is connected to all our primary systems. Shutting it down hard could leave us dead in space." "Better than being atomized," Reed muttered. He made his decision. "Wilson, emergency shutdown. All hands, brace for power loss." Across the ship, crew members strapped in and steadied themselves. In the engine room, Wilson and his team worked frantically, rerouting power and disengaging safety protocols designed to prevent exactly what they were now attempting. Cutting main power to the drive in 3, 2, 1. The Nemesis shuddered violently as the Prometheus drive shut down. For a terrifying moment, all lights and systems went dark. The ship drifted, silent and wounded, but intact. On the bridge, emergency lighting cast an eerie red glow over the crew. Reed gripped the arms of his command chair, counting the seconds in his head. 3, 4, 5. With a series of clicks and hums, the backup systems engaged. Basic life support, minimal propulsion, emergency communications, just enough to keep them alive. "Damage report," Reed ordered, his voice steady. Davis ran a quick diagnostic on his half-functioning console. "Main power grid is fried, weapons offline. Shields at 12%, the ghost drive is completely dead." He hesitated, glancing up. His expression was a mix of worry and wonder. "But sir, the Prometheus drive worked. The Vorn fleet is completely disabled." Reed stood, moving toward the main view screen. It flickered with static. "Communications, can we reach the coalition?" The comms officer shook her head. "Long-range comms are down, sir. We can try boosting the emergency beacon, but I don't know if it'll reach Kalmar." "Do it," Reed ordered. "And get me a visual on the Vorn fleet, even if you have to look out a window with binoculars." As the crew worked, Morgan stepped beside him. "What do you think Krell will do now?" Reed was thoughtful. If I know Vorn thinking, and I spent years studying it, he's reconsidering the entire campaign. The Prometheus wave didn't just disable his ships. It showed him a weapon he's never seen before, can't defend against, and doesn't understand. Morgan exhaled. Fear, he said, realization dawning. We've given him something to fear. Reed nodded. The most powerful weapon isn't the one that destroys your enemy. It's the one that convinces them not to fight in the first place. From across the bridge, the comms officer suddenly called out, Captain, we've managed to get short-range comms back online. And sir, there's an incoming message from the Vorn command ship. Reed and Morgan exchanged surprised glances. Put it through, Reed ordered. The static on the main screen cleared slightly, revealing the scarred face of War Master Krell. His yellow eyes burned with a mixture of rage and, most importantly, caution. Captain Reed, the Vorn commander's translated voice came through, laced with something Reed had never heard before in Krell's tone. Respect. The transmission crackled with occasional breaks, but Krell's voice came through. It seems your reputation is not exaggerated, Captain Reed. Reed straightened, facing his adversary. War Master, your ships will regain power within a few hours. The effect is temporary. Krell's expression shifted slightly. A mercy or a weakness? A choice, Reed replied. I could have destroyed your fleet. Instead, I've given you the chance to make a choice of your own. The Vorn was silent for a moment. And what choice would that be, human? Withdraw from Coalition. Space. Return to your territory. Find another solution to your resource problems, one that doesn't involve conquest. Krell's face twisted in what might have been a laugh. Or you will destroy us next time? Reed's expression remained calm. There doesn't need to be a next time, War Master. The Coalition is willing to negotiate. Trade agreements, resource sharing. War benefits neither of us. The Vorn do not negotiate with inferiors, Krell said, but his tone lacked conviction. Then consider this, Reed continued. The weapon we just used, it was a prototype, a test model. Even now, Earth is building more, installing them on other ships. How many fleets are you willing to lose before you accept that some enemies are too costly to fight? Silence stretched across the bridge. For a long moment, Reed wondered if the connection had been lost. Then Krell's voice returned, quieter, more measured. You are an unusual species, humans. You build weapons of incredible destruction, then hesitate to use them. His yellow eyes narrowed. We will withdraw, for now, but the Vorn Empire does not forget, Captain Reed. Neither do humans, War Master, Reed replied. Remember that. The screen went dark as Krell ended the transmission. On the bridge of the Nemesis, the crew exchanged hopeful glances. Did we just win? Davis asked. Reed turned to his sensor officer. For today, at least. He addressed the bridge. Good work, all of you. Now let's get this ship moving before the Vorn change their minds. 3 days later, the damaged Nemesis limped into orbit around Kalmar. The Coalition fleet, once wary of the human vessel, now moved to escort it with newfound respect. Admiral Levick himself came aboard, his scaled face lined with stress, but his relief was unmistakable. The Vorn fleet has withdrawn from Coalition space entirely, he reported as they walked through the ship's battered corridors. Our long-range scouts confirm they're returning to their own territory. Reed nodded. They're pragmatic. They won't waste resources on a fight they don't think they can win. Levick stopped, turning to face the human captain. You saved Kalmar. Saved billions of lives. The Coalition Council has authorized me to offer Earth an immediate upgrade in membership status, full voting rights, access to all technology exchanges. Earth will be pleased, Reed said. The alien commander hesitated. There is one more thing. Many in the Coalition are curious about this new weapon, the one that disabled the Vorn fleet without destroying it. Such technology would be valuable to share. Reed's expression revealed nothing. I'll relay your interest to Earth Command, Admiral. But some technologies aren't meant to be shared, even with allies. Levick studied him for a moment, then nodded. I understand. And perhaps it's better this way. Some legends are more powerful when the details remain mysterious. He extended a scaled hand, a human gesture of respect. He had learned. The Nemesis will always be welcome in Coalition space, Captain Reed. After Levick's departure, Reed made his way to the observation deck. Repairs were underway, but it would be weeks before the Nemesis was fully operational. Again, through the viewport, Kalmar hung below, its blue oceans and green continents untouched by war. Morgan found him there, gazing at the planet they had saved. "Orders from Earth Command, Captain," the XO reported. "Once repairs are complete, we're to return to Earth." And then, Morgan handed him a data tablet. "They're keeping the Nemesis active. No more reserve status. They want you to remain in command." Reed was silent for a long moment. "After everything that happened at Proxima, I never thought they'd trust me with this ship again." Morgan shrugged. "The Nemesis needs you, and maybe you need it too." Reed turned back to the viewport. Somewhere out there, the story of what had happened between the Nemesis and the Vorn fleet was already spreading, growing, becoming legend. "The most powerful weapon isn't the one that destroys your enemy," he murmured. "It's the one that convinces them not to fight in the first place." Morgan smirked. "Is that what we are now, sir? A weapon?" Reed considered the question, then finally he shook his head. "No, we're something more complicated than that. We're the monster under the bed that keeps the real monsters at bay, the shadow that makes even conquerors think twice." He touched the cool glass of the viewport, looking out at the stars, where countless civilizations lived in peace, unaware of how close they had come to war. "That's the weight of legend, XO," he said, "and the burden we carry." As the Nemesis orbited silently above Kalmar, its black hull absorbing the light of the system's sun, word of its deed spread throughout the galaxy. On 100 worlds and 1,000 languages, beings told the story of the human ship that had faced a Vorn armada alone, and won. With each telling, the legend grew. Some said the Nemesis could turn invisible. Others claimed it could disable entire fleets with a mere wave of energy. Still others whispered that its captain Hagar